The first thing most readers notice about Sense and Sensibility is the romance. The first thing Jane Austen wants you to notice is the money. Before anyone falls in love, before anyone suffers a broken heart, and before letters, secrets, and proposals begin changing the story, the Dashwood family faces a much more immediate problem. They are about to lose the life they know. The death of Henry Dashwood is not simply the loss of a father and husband. His death changes the financial position of his wife and daughters almost immediately. For years, Norland Park has been home. It is where Eleanor, Marianne, and Margaret have grown up. It represents stability, familiarity, and the expectation that tomorrow will probably look a lot like today. Then Henry Dashwood dies, and Norland does not remain with Mrs. Dashwood and her daughters. The estate passes to John Dashwood, Henry's son from his first marriage. The women who have lived at Norland suddenly find themselves in an uncomfortable position. They are still physically in the home, but it is no longer their home. To a modern reader, this may seem obviously unfair. Why couldn't Henry Dashwood simply leave the estate to his wife and daughters? To understand the opening of the novel, it helps to understand the financial and legal world Jane Austen was writing about. Property and inheritance in early 19th century England were often controlled by legal settlements and family arrangements that strongly favored male heirs. Women could find themselves financially dependent on fathers, brothers, husbands, or other male relatives. A woman's financial security could change dramatically because of a death, a marriage, or an inheritance decision she had very little power to control. Austen does not stop the novel and give readers a lecture about inheritance law. She does something more effective. She shows us what the system does to one family. Henry Dashwood understands the problem. During his final days, he knows his wife and daughters may be left with limited financial security. Since he cannot simply change the inheritance arrangement, he asks John Dashwood to help them. John agrees. At first, there seems to be no reason to doubt him. He has made a promise to his dying father, and John initially appears willing to honor that promise. But Jane Austen is very interested in the distance between what people intend to do and what they actually do when keeping a promise becomes inconvenient. John does not immediately decide to abandon his stepmother and sisters. Instead, his generosity slowly disappears. At first, he considers giving them a substantial amount of money. Then he begins thinking that perhaps they need less. Maybe a smaller amount would be enough. Then his wife, Fanny Dashwood, becomes part of the conversation. Fanny does not need to shout. She does not need to order John to break his promise. She simply gives him reasons. The Dashwood sisters are young. They may marry. Mrs. Dashwood can probably live on less. Perhaps the women are not in as difficult a position as John originally believed. Every time John and Fanny discuss the situation, the needs of the Dashwood women seem to become smaller. At the same time, John's responsibility to his own household seems to become larger. Eventually, John manages to convince himself that giving his stepmother and sisters very little is perfectly reasonable. This is one of the most revealing moments in the opening of Sense and Sensibility. John does not think of himself as cruel. He does not say, "I am breaking my promise because I am selfish." Instead, he creates an explanation that allows him to feel comfortable with his decision. That makes him much more believable. People rarely describe their own actions in the worst possible way. They justify them. They find reasons. They adjust the story until the choice they want to make begins to feel like the sensible choice. John Dashwood does exactly that, and the Dashwood women pay the price. Mrs. Dashwood and her daughters eventually leave Norland. They move to Barton Cottage. Compared with Norland, their new home is modest. The rooms are smaller. Their financial situation is more limited. Their social position has changed. The move represents a real loss. But Austen also uses that loss to move the entire story forward. If the Dashwoods had remained comfortably at Norland, many of the relationships that define the novel might never have developed. The event that feels like the destruction of their future becomes the beginning of a completely different future. This is where the two sisters at the center of the novel become especially important. Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood experience the same family crisis, but they do not experience the world in the same way. Eleanor is observant, careful, and practical. She feels things deeply, but she does not believe every feeling must immediately be expressed. For Eleanor, judgment matters. Emotion is real, but emotion should not automatically control every decision. Marianne is almost the opposite. She values openness, passion, and honesty of feeling. If Marianne is happy, everyone knows. If she is disappointed, everyone knows that too. To Marianne, hiding a genuine emotion can feel almost dishonest. Why pretend not to care when you care deeply? Why hide happiness? Why reduce love to polite conversation? These differences are not small personality details. They form the central tension of the novel. Eleanor represents sense. Marianne represents sensibility. But Jane Austen is not simply telling us that Eleanor is right and Marianne is wrong. That would be a much easier story. Eleanor's self-control is a strength. It allows her to remain calm when the people around her are overwhelmed. It helps her observe details other people miss. But her restraint also creates a problem. Eleanor can carry enormous emotional burdens without anyone realizing she needs help. Marianne's openness can make her impulsive. She can build expectations quickly. She can allow emotion to move faster than facts. But Marianne also experiences beauty and affection with extraordinary intensity. Music matters to her. Poetry matters to her. Nature matters to her. She does not simply pass through life. She feels it. Austen gives both sisters admirable qualities, and both sisters have weaknesses they do not fully understand yet. Then the romantic relationships begin. Edward Ferrars enters Eleanor's life quietly. He is not introduced as a dazzling romantic hero. He is not especially dramatic. He does not arrive with the kind of confidence that immediately captures everyone's attention. Edward is thoughtful, reserved, and sincere. Eleanor begins to care for him through conversation and observation. She notices his intelligence, his kindness, and his character. Their affection develops slowly. There is no dramatic declaration announcing the beginning of their relationship. Instead, Austen allows the connection to grow through small moments. That fits Eleanor. She pays attention to actions. She watches how people behave. She does not need a dramatic performance to believe affection may be real. Marianne's romantic story begins very differently. John Willoughby seems almost designed to appeal to her. His entrance into the novel feels dramatic. Marianne injures her ankle during a walk. Willoughby helps her and carries her home. He is handsome, confident, energetic, and emotionally expressive. He likes the books Marianne likes. He enjoys music. He shares her enthusiasm for the countryside. Their conversations feel effortless. Marianne believes she has found someone who understands her completely, and it is easy to see why. Willoughby reflects Marianne's own ideas about love. Their connection is immediate, visible, and intense. They spend increasing amounts of time together. The people around them begin assuming that marriage is likely. Marianne certainly seems to believe the future is clear. This is where Austen begins quietly warning the reader. Marianne feels certain, but certainty is not the same as knowledge. She knows how Willoughby makes her feel. She knows what they have in common. She knows that he appears to enjoy her company. But there are still things Marianne does not know. Eleanor notices that. She watches more carefully. She studies behavior. She pays attention to what people say and what they avoid saying. This does not mean Eleanor knows the truth about Willoughby. She does not. But she is less willing to treat assumptions as facts. That difference between the sisters will become increasingly important. At this point in Sense and Sensibility, both Eleanor and Marianne believe they understand their own approach to life. Eleanor trusts judgment. Marianne trusts emotion. Eleanor's affection for Edward grows quietly. Marianne's attachment to Willoughby seems impossible to hide. Both sisters are beginning to imagine futures built around men they believe they understand. Both are about to discover how dangerous incomplete information can be. That is what makes the opening of Sense and Sensibility so important. The novel does not simply introduce characters and prepare a romance. Austen establishes almost every major pressure that will shape the rest of the story. Money, inheritance, family obligation, broken promises, social expectations, first impressions, and the difference between what people feel and what they actually know. The Dashwood women have already lost Norland. John Dashwood has already shown how easily a promise can disappear when self-interest becomes involved. Eleanor has begun quietly trusting Edward. Marianne has placed enormous confidence in Willoughby. The pieces are already in place. Now life is going to test both sisters. And the real question is not whether sense is better than sensibility. The question is what happens when neither reason nor emotion has the full story. In Part 2, Willoughby suddenly leaves, a secret engagement changes Eleanor's future, and the love stories that seemed secure begin falling apart. Thank you for listening to Small Books. Continue to Part 2, Love Falls Apart.